tantrum. But by the end of all of that, he was just spent, and he really, really needed some downtime, and just spent some time in, his part of the hotel suite that we're in, and then just gearing up for the flight back to California today.
Which is today.
Which is today.
And Amanda Peaks would love to meet. They've obviously met Stephen Vaxxed.
Exactly.
But if any possibility they could just have a quick blow loads of hearts and kisses at him, they would make them very happy.
That'd be great.
All right, on to the subjects. I know you're on a time scale here, but very, very important this. So can you explain, First of all, what is the CDC? What does it mean? What is the CDC?
The CDC means Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They don't have the and prevention. They just put CDC. That is, they are charged with public health in the United States and all public health. The CDC very much focuses on infectious disease. That is what their focus is. But that's not truly their charge. Their charge is for all diseases. It's not only is it infectious disease, but it's chronic conditions. It is obesity. It is autism. It's ADD, ADHD. And if you look at their budget is bloated for infectious disease. Their budget is bloated for vaccination uptake. But if you look at the rest of the slices of the pie where they really should be focusing in, because is in a crisis of chronic disease, they pay very, very little attention to it. And this latest study that came out that was presented last week at the end of November is another example where they did a nod to non-infectious disease. They looked at developmental disabilities in children, and again, they did a very, very poor job with their research. They glossed over the very, very alarming conclusions and acted as if there was nothing to see here. Again, there was to me, it's very, very difficult to look at the results that they published and not just start crying.
So what do they actually put out? They put out, everyone's calling it 1 in 36. What does 1 in 36 mean?
It means that in the families interviewed, this was based on a parental survey that was done in the families interviewed, out of all of the children that were represented within those families, 1 in 36 had autism, or approximately 2.8% of the population of children within that survey had been diagnosed with autism and still had autism. So they, it wasn't something that was transient where some doctor just made some flip remark about autism. It was truly a healthcare practitioner, and I looked at the wording of the report, and it said that a practitioner had made a diagnosis of autism. And so that 1 in 36 number means that out of every 36 children that were represented in that particular survey, which was a cross-section of the United States, out of every 36 children, at least one of them would have autism. And I would say, you can look at it pretty much unequivocally as this is a baseline. This is a low estimate of the actual incidence of autism in the United States.
Is it any age? Are we looking at any age here?
The age groups were anywhere from 3 years old to 17 years old. Any child that was over 17 years old, say they had reached their 18th birthday, they were considered an adult and they weren't a part of that survey. Any child younger than 3 years old then was deemed too young to get a diagnosis for a developmental disability, and so they were thrown out of the study. I would say that's one of the flaws right there, is that including children that were as young as 3, many children that are 3 years old that have autism have not yet gotten their diagnosis. And when you do that, when you include those younger children, this is the same thing that the CDC has done over and over and over again in their studies. When you include those younger children, then you're missing diagnoses that are actually there. So again, that 1 in 36 number is too low.
Can you explain how these people do a study? Because no one knows. How did when we just hear 1 in 36 as done by the CDC? It was all very important. How do you do a study? What do they do?
What they do, this is in a part of the CDC called the National Center for Health Statistics. And every year they contact different families at random. Okay, they do what's called a random sampling of the entire United States. They look at, I'm not sure if they look at all 50 states, but they have a large number of participants in this survey, and it's called the National Health Information Survey. And the parents of the families then fill out the survey, and they answer specific questions about the health status of their children. The survey is quite long. But this particular study winnowed down on developmental disabilities as a whole, autism as a part of the developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and then another category which was children with developmental disabilities outside of autism.
So is this something they receive through the mail and they do it at home? Yes. And send it back?
They receive it through the mail. They fill out the survey. They send it back. I know that's in the past how they've done it. I'm not sure if they do that via a phone interview now, but in the past they did actually have a survey.
Well, many of our peeps have reported getting phone calls from the CDC for that kind of thing. Here's what's making me think, what a sham in a way. What we did on the bus, thoroughly interviewing live, face to face. So it could be anybody. CDC could send this house a form, and anyone could fill it out here in this place with whatever they want.
That is correct.
This is what we did on the bus. I'm sorry, but guys, does anyone else agree with me? Is way more accurate than sending out a load of paper on a history. We did before, after, we covered. That has got to have some credibility.
That has an incredible level of credibility, and the sheer numbers of individuals that you did, the number of individuals that you interviewed and got into depth as their particular medical history is much, much more valuable than a survey question where you just check yes or no. And this is probably the least accurate survey, or the least accurate instrument that the CDC has in order to determine what the autism rates are. Okay, this is the same survey that they do it every year. In 2014, they came out with the 1 in 45 number. Okay, 1 in 45. It did not increase in 2015, but now it has jumped in 2016 to the 1 in 36 number. Okay, so it's just based on the survey instrument. Parents fill out the survey, whether it's on paper or by phone. They tabulate the information, but there are no medical records involved. So there are no medical histories. The diagnoses of autism are based on parent recall. The only thing that brings in a medical practitioner is the fact that they ask the parents, they don't ask the parents if their child has autism, they ask their parents if the child has been diagnosed with autism by a medical practitioner. Okay, so that's the only level of security really that we have with those particular numbers. And again, I dare say they are low. I believe the actual incidence and prevalence of autism in the United States is much higher.
Well, think of all that. Just in this house, we've got your son. How old is Steve?
19.
He's 19, so he's missed it.
Right.
There's Billy and there's Kent. So we've missed 3 adults here. I know the peeps, all the peeps of my age, and we have kids that have been missed out of this study.
They're aging out of these childhood studies, and they're no longer counted within the system. Now, presumably, the rates of autism are lower in those older children, presumably, but they have not taken the time to actually diagnose the entire population. Okay, and the CDC, when they do these studies, they focus on children and not adults, and that's a shame because a lot of children are aging out. They're becoming 18 years old, 19 years old, and so they're aging out of the system, and so the CDC no longer counts them.
All right, so let's just say just for argument's sake, they're right, and it's 1 in 36.
Okay.
Why is that not a national emergency? 1 in 36 children, if you like, under 18, have an autism diagnosis. That's serious problem.
It is a huge problem. It was a huge problem when it was 1 in 45. It was a huge problem when it was 1 in 68. And the thing that is so disheartening about this study is they say, oh, well, the autism rates increased, but it wasn't statistically significant. It wasn't a significant increase. So when you read, the average pediatrician is not going to read this study. They'll read the summary, they'll read the key points, and that's all they'll have time for, and they'll toss the paper on their desk somewhere. But when you read the key points of the study, it says that there was no increase in autism diagnoses, no statistically significant increase in autism diagnoses, which is false. When you look at the study, when you look at the actual figures and the graphs, and you see the autism rates go up from 2014 to 2016, there is an increase. The reason that the increase they deem is not statistically significant is that there weren't enough participants in the studies. When you do statistics, you want your sampling size, you want the number of individuals that did those surveys and turned in those surveys to be as large as possible, so you can see small fluctuations. But here we went from 1 in 45 all the way to 1 in 36, which means essentially that in every classroom in the United States, every public school classroom in the United States, there's at least one kid with autism. And there's probably more. I dare say that when I talk to teachers in the public school system, I hear that there are more.
Of course, we hear from a lot.
Do
we know how many people were in this 1 in 36 study? Do you know how big the study was?
That I do not know. I need to delve further into the study.
Sure.
I don't know how big the sampling size was. I would say that I would gather it was in the tens of thousands, maybe 40,000, something like that.
All right. So here's a hard question for you to answer, but how can they get away with this? How can they get away with the fact it's not in the news? Do you see it in the news? Do you see 1 in 36 why is it not headlines? Why is there a media blackout on this? Why are so many people involved in the dark side of covering up autism? Epidemic, pandemic, call it what you like. It's everywhere. We don't need 1 in 36 from the CDC. We can see it in our supermarkets and at the schools. We can see it everywhere.
The problem is that scientific reporters in the media are programmed, and they're basically drones at the hand of the pharmaceutical industry and drones at the hand of the government agencies like the CDC, and they will puppet the party line. And I've heard this from scientific reporters saying that they won't actually read the papers. They don't read the papers themselves. They wait for other expert scientists, like experts at the CDC, to interpret the papers for them. And so CDC scientists get up, they do the same thing that they always do. They say, there's nothing to see here. This is, there's no real problem. They even go back to their fallback. Oh, it's better diagnosing. There's a better, since between 2014 and 2016, somehow magically we got better at diagnosing autism. And so if there is an increase, it's not real. And so that is the spin of the CDC. And the individuals in the fourth estate, the individuals in the news media, the print media, the television media, the internet, are basically taking CDC's interpretation, and that's what they echo back. Okay, so this is a nationwide emergency. More resources need to be put towards this nationwide emergency. The CDC literally needs to be gutted.
Absolutely.
You look at the individuals that are doing vaccine safety. You look at the individuals that are charged with autism and developmental disabilities. They're crooks. They're crooks, and they have been shown over and over and over again to commit fraud. People like Colleen Boyle, Frank DiStefano, Marshalyn, Jurgen Alsop. I mean, we call these people out directly by name. Melinda Wharton, who is the head of the vaccine safety division of the CDC, they have shown themselves time and time again as being crooked and always dismissing anything that would show that there would be a relationship between vaccines and any developmental disability, including autism, even though it's there in black and white.
But the corruption goes also deeper than that. You know, even, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, you do not have to react to this, but even through our national autism associations like Autism Speaks, where the government go to get their advice on autism, it's everywhere. It's got to be the people now. I'm not asking you to comment on that. I'm telling you, because I'm absolutely fed up with the level of...
Autism Speaks is an arm of Pfizer.
There you go.
Autism Speaks is an arm of Pfizer. If you look at the revolving door between Autism Speaks and the pharmaceutical industry, it is mind-boggling. It is mind-blowing that their chief executive officer, their chief scientific officer, their other officers that are in charge of science have come from Pfizer. Okay, and there's a huge problem there. And when you have Autism Speaks as an organization that is not reaching out to families, that is not trying to find a solution to this particular problem, that has indemnified vaccines over and over again on their website, and their primary focus is to reach out to pharmaceutical companies so they can come up with psychotropic drugs for children with autism. They're looking for new markets for pharmaceutical companies. They don't care about kids. They care about selling drugs. They want to put our kids on psychotropic drugs. That is what Autism Speaks does.
Money before human life. These people are choosing money.
Absolutely. You know, a dollar to Autism Speaks is worse than nothing, because they're actually taking everything in the wrong direction, in the absolute wrong direction. And these organizations are in bed with CDC as well. Okay.
Can I ask you kind of a personal question, and that is, how old are you? You can make it up a bit if you don't want to tell the truth.
I'm 54 years
You're
old.
54, okay.
Yes.
So we're around the same age.
Right.
I don't know about you, but when I was a child at school, I had never heard of the word autism.
I heard of the word autism when I was a late teenager, probably after I had graduated from high school. I had heard from autism. I had never seen, there were no children with autism in my high school. I went to a very large high school that was 3 grades that had 3,000 students. There were literally no children with autism. And I knew that because where I was, you know, I was a band geek, and I was in the music program, and the building next to us, we actually shared the building with those individuals that back then we called them orthopedically handicapped. And we didn't have children with developmental disabilities. We had children with orthopedic handicaps, but we had very, very few children with any type of developmental disabilities, including Down syndrome.
Right, well, so now Paul Offit would say, well, they were always there. He says this, they were always there. They were the anoraks in the classroom, and it's all because of better diagnosis. Now, take Steve and take Bill, and a postman could diagnose them. A mailman with autism. I mean, with all due respect to our beautiful children,
they scream out that they have autism. They scream out that they have severe developmental disabilities. And you know, we're in this. The media has bought into this lie, and even the entertainment industry now, with different shows that highlight these autistic savants like The Good Doctor. I mean, I hate that program. I absolutely hate that program, because it is a part of the normalization of autism into society. Nothing to see here. Oh, autism is a gift. They're just a gift to society. I'm sorry, when you see your child in chronic pain, struggling to be able to speak, to communicate with you, it's not a gift. It's a scourge.
And your boy is in severe pain. That's why you're seeing a gastroenterologist.
That is correct.
And he's full of ulcers and very painful things that none of us can imagine the pain that Steve goes through.
We're experiencing relief from the pain. We're seeing different things, different very positive things happen as we treat this as a medical condition, and we treat the source and the cause of the pain. We're seeing advances that we had never seen before, even though we started later. You know, we didn't really start with this whole journey until Steve was 18 years old, and we're seeing advances. But to think that these behaviors that people think are, they're the quirks or idiosyncrasies of autism. In my son's case, they were tied to his chronic pain, and to think that he had lived through that chronic pain, and that we had basically lived and died by what the latest bowel movement was, what was the timing, just things that people that are just completely unimaginable, for those people that are sitting on the outside thinking that somehow that, autistic kids are nerds, are quirky. They're not. They're in
math geniuses.
Yes. And severe, yeah, exactly. Savants. You don't know how many people come up to you in the grocery store and ask what your child does, what's his savant characteristic, and it's completely insulting. And rather than, usually I'll blow it off or make something up because I don't want to go back into the speech regarding the lie that's purported in the media that somehow these children are geniuses and have savant capabilities. There are a few autistic savants walking around, but I'm sorry, my child is not Rain Man. No.
And we're going to go and meet him now. What's it going to take? So this year we're at 1 in 36.
This year we're at 1 in 36. What they do this survey every year. What is going to be the number? This was for 2016. What's the number in 2017? What's the number in 2018? We're seeing exponential growth. The way that Dr. Stephanie Seneff characterized it in her work, she's published this. She was also featured in the movie Vaxxed. It is a exponential growth curve, and exponential growth is scary, and we're still in that exponential growth curve. We're not seeing growth tapered off, and the ultimate result of the exponential growth curve is 1 in 2 children with autism. Do we really want that?
You have autism, or you're a carer,
or you're a caregiver. Everybody's tied up in basically the country and the world, because the United States has exported autism to the rest of the world. The world shuts down.
Right, there's no military, there's nothing.
No, absolutely nothing. My son got
except for brain damage
his notice for selective service for the draft. Because they still do selective service in the United States. They don't call people for the draft, but he's not exempt for the draft. But he and honestly, if they ever called him up, we would have to show up for the interview, and they would
please film that.
It automatically write the exemption for him at that particular point in time. But how can you maintain anything with such a horrendous epidemic? And I also do want to mention about the study. The study excluded children with ADD and ADHD, but the study also showed that all of the developmental disabilities were on the rise. When you looked at children with developmental disabilities in 2014 and compared them with those in 2016, all developmental disabilities, including autism, PDD, NOS, any type of mental retardation, that if you lump them all together in a category, they're all on a very, very significant rise. It's a significant trajectory, and it's very alarming. So it's not just autism, it's a significant portion of the society that is basically unable to be able to function on their own.
Right, and we've seen that just from the bus people study as we travel around. Transverse myelitis, there's paralysis everywhere, ongoing massive injuries. Can you imagine if a real study of everybody affected by the injuries of vaccines, our sons included, can you imagine what that would look like? It has to be 1 in 2. I predict 1 in 2 people have a vaccine injury of, all these peanuts, death by peanut.
Death by
that was not in our school when we were younger.
We're already at 1 in 2 children have some type of chronic malady, some type of chronic condition. We're already 1 in 2 with that. I mean, so what are we going for? An entire society that has peanut allergies and has diabetes,
psoriasis. It just goes on and on and on.
All these different
infertility,
chronic conditions. Teenage women experiencing menopause. It just goes on and on and on and on. And so there's got to be some type of end to this. And you may feel like you're Isaiah. You may feel like you're just the voice crying in the wilderness, but you're not alone. There's a lot of people that are up in arms, and we will continue to be up in arms. I've been asked several times, when will I stop doing this? When will it be enough? And I said, well, if you check my body and I'm cold and I don't have a pulse, then I will stop doing this. So other than that, we just have to continue.
Everybody absolutely loves you. And now, the people, we have to take control. I'm not advocating that we become terrorist nightmares. All I'm saying is we have to take control. We have to protect the unborn. We have a duty to protect the ones that are injured.
Yes.
And that's why we've set up Peeps TV.
Wow.
Which we can now talk about. We're gonna go out and talk about in a minute. I don't want Brian.
It's
Brian Burrows needs to.
It's up on Roku.
It's live
now, right?
up now, and we need you to be a major part. We want you to lead the way. Please lead the way. Tell us what to do. Let's do our own studies. Let's send out our own papers.
Right.
Our lot can do questionnaires, and we can send them out to all the others as well. So it's all fair. Or whatever you do, you're the expert in this. Brian Hooker, please lead the way. These peeps will do.
I have a paper coming out next week regarding the CDC whistleblower. It has been 4 long years since he had been in touch with me. He actually got in touch with me in November of 2013. So it's been 4 years. What has been done? Nothing. Absolutely, positively nothing. And even he himself, Bill Thompson, would say he is completely discouraged that what he did, all the documents that he handed over, have led to nothing, have led to absolutely, positively nothing. So that paper is coming out next week in the Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons. If Polly and I can figure out a way to do this remotely, I can talk about that paper again once it comes out. And but check out Peeps TV. This is huge. This is huge.
Actually, do we have a Peeps TV host in Reading? We do. I'm pretty sure we do. We're going to send them into you to do a live on social media.
I'm sure
I'm kind of a little jealous because I want to be the one asking the questions, but I'll get over it. Okay. The main thing is you've got to get out there and do your thing.
Absolutely. We can do Peeps TV directly from Reading. I mean, you've got hosts everywhere, so there's no reason that we couldn't do something, get it up on Roku, and go from there.
Okay, we'll do that. Now
we're continuing. There are so many things that are in development. I'm continuing to publish. I'm working with vaccine data, with vaccine injury. I also have received another 50,000 pages of information from the CDC via the FOIA. So these are secret documents that I'm going through. So Wonderful. The work just continues. The work continues. It will not stop. And the depth of the depravity of these federal agencies that are downplaying the 1 in 36 number, as bad as you can imagine, it's much worse.
Yeah, it is. Now, we were a little premature with announcing the Peeps TV because I forgot we haven't announced that yet. So that's okay. We're just doing an Andy. Everyone will know what that means.
I stole your thunder.
It's my fault totally. So actually, it's not my thunder. Brian Burrows is going to go live. I think Jack Knight's about to go live on our social media, and when he's finished, we will go out live and we will tell you that we are live on Roku. I will say no more.
Give them specific instructions.
We will give you specific instructions. And please, Brian, will you be a Peeps TV host? Will you have your own little section on there? Will you report? Will you lead the way on the science for us? Please, please, please. Lead the people.
Lead the people.
And just one more thing. Okay. Both being people, we both are big God fans. We are. Jesus is our boss. Pray big and all that. I wouldn't want to be one of those bad peeps at the CDC. Would you? Choosing money over God?
No, why?
Do they have any idea? That's such a dangerous thing to do.
The thing that I never understood when I was hearing all these horrific things, and even before I was in contact with Dr. Thompson, was how come there weren't more people like that? How come there weren't more people like that? I mean, what depth of depravity, how cut off must you be from your conscience to be a Colleen Boyle? To be a Marsha Lynn, Jürgen Alsop, to be, to be Julie Gerberding, to be Thomas Frieden, who washed his hands of the entire ordeal. What type of person is this? What type of, how evil can these individuals be? I mean, to over time and time and time again, looking at the history of Colleen Boyle alone, with what she did against the Vietnam veterans with Agent Orange, by covering up the effect of Agent Orange with chronic medical conditions, by then moving directly into covering up the effect of thimerosal and developmental disabilities, and then covering up the fact that Paul Thorson was in direct violation of federal law, CDC policies and procedures. She covered that up. They knew that. They knew ahead of time. They knew prior to the federal indictment of Freudian slip, of Paul Thorson, the federal indictment of Paul Thorson, that he had embezzled that money. They knew 2 years ahead of time, and they actually did absolutely nothing. They did not report that. There were evidences of inaccuracies and inconsistencies in the accounting procedures, in the way the data were handled, in the way that people's medical records were handled. People like you and I, whose medical records were accessed by the CDC inappropriately and improperly. All these things happened under Colleen Boyle's watch, and she did absolutely, positively nothing about it. Colleen Boyle cares about Colleen Boyle and money.
Well, I wouldn't want to be her. That's all I can say. How petrifying would it be to be Colleen
Boyle? It's as you say when you're a Christian. We don't say you only live once. We say you only live forever. Okay, and so you have to guard your heart, and you have to know and embrace your destiny, your God-given destiny in terms of what you're doing. And the path and the choices are so easily discernible, and they're so clear. And you see these people on Peeps TV, they're just working their hearts out. They're working their hearts out. And we contrast people like Colleen Boyle and these just downright vicious people in federal agencies. It's not just the CDC, it's the FDA, it's the National Institutes of Health, it's the Department of Health and Human Services. All those federal agencies just are littered with people that care absolutely nothing but themselves. Absolutely nothing but themselves. They're just there to gain in glory. And then you contrast the people that are just like Peeps TV hosts that are doing their best to get by with their own wonderful special child. A lot of them are single parents.
Right.
And yet they're taking this on. They're taking on this fight. They're embracing their destiny. And your reward in heaven is great.
Because we all love one another, and that's what we're supposed to do here on earth, not hurt